don't. I mean, not bending on some of the direction they've taken, it will jeopardize our relationship with the United States, which is the largest trading relationship that we have.
At the heart of Canada's energy debate, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has launched a fierce opposition against Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's controversial emissions cap. The policy, hailed by some as a necessary step to reduce carbon emissions, is seen by Smith as a direct attack on Alberta's autonomy and the economic backbone of the entire country. Alberta, a province known for its vast oil and gas reserves, is the pillar of Canada's energy sector. The emissions cap, which aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from this critical sector, will inevitably affect production. While some environmentalists cheer the move, others see it as a reckless gamble with Canada's economy. Smith argues that the cap isn't just about emissions, it is effectively a production cap. If the technology to meet these emissions targets isn't available, something Smith points out will take time to develop, then production will inevitably drop. And when production drops, so will Alberta's economy, dragging down the nation's energy exports and, with them, national revenues. However, the implications go beyond economics. Smith raises a more significant concern: Canada's relationship with its largest trading partner, the United States. Energy security is a top priority for the White House, and by imposing such restrictive targets, Canada risks losing its credibility as a reliable energy supplier. In an era of growing energy independence in the U.S., Smith warns that Trudeau's cap could open the door for global rivals, like Saudi Arabia and Russia, to seize the energy market share that Canada heavily depends on. Trudeau, however, seems undeterred by these warnings. Despite mounting backlash, including from his own constituents, his government insists that their aggressive emissions reduction targets are necessary to combat climate change. But for Smith, this feels less like a move toward sustainability and more like political grandstanding. Trudeau's government, she argues, is more focused on optics than on realistic solutions. If they were serious about fighting climate change, they would fast-track the approval of new technologies, she states, calling out the federal government's failure to recognize the technological gap that will take years, if not decades, to bridge. While Alberta's energy sector grapples with these looming restrictions, Trudeau's credibility is further undermined by a scandal involving his Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault. It has recently come to light that Guilbeault, once a lobbyist for a firm that has received millions in taxpayer-funded green energy subsidies, stands to profit personally from these initiatives. Smith isn't just attacking Trudeau's environmental policies, she's calling attention to a government that seems more interested in lining its pockets than in genuinely protecting the environment. The scandal doesn't end with Guilbeault. The entire Liberal approach to policy is being questioned, particularly their handling of taxes. Smith highlights Trudeau's carbon tax as another example of misguided leadership, yet another financial burden on Canadians already struggling with skyrocketing energy costs. Meanwhile, Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, has proposed a bold alternative, eliminating taxes on overtime work. In contrast to Trudeau's complicated and heavy-handed policies, Poilievre's suggestion offers a simple, straightforward solution that could alleviate some financial strain on middle-class Canadians. Smith, too, has her own vision for Alberta's future, and it's one that doesn't involve strangling its energy sector with unattainable targets. She advocates for the gradual introduction of carbon capture technologies, which would allow the province to reduce emissions without crippling its economy. Unlike Trudeau, who Smith argues is rushing into flawed policies, her plan offers a more balanced approach that acknowledges the importance of both environmental responsibility and economic sustainability. Smith's vision for Alberta is built on practical, long-term solutions, rather than rushing into policies that threaten to decimate an entire industry. Carbon capture technology, she argues, is the way forward if given enough time to develop. Alberta, with its vast energy resources, is uniquely positioned to play a pivotal role in reducing emissions while continuing to power the Canadian economy. Smith's approach acknowledges the importance of energy security for Canada's future, positioning the province as an essential player in both the country's energy transition and its economic prosperity. Trudeau's emissions cap, however, fails to consider the realities of the energy market. By imposing drastic emissions targets without realistic timelines or the necessary technology, Trudeau is setting up Canada's energy sector for failure. Smith's arguments are grounded in the belief that emissions can be reduced without crippling production, but only if industry is given the time and resources to innovate and develop new technologies. Her proposal isn't about stalling action on climate change, it's about recognizing that real change takes time and careful planning. Unlike Trudeau's top-down approach, Smith's vision empowers the energy sector to innovate and thrive within a framework that acknowledges the realities of the market and the pace of technological advancement. At the same time, Smith argues that Trudeau's actions represent an overreach of federal power, infringing on Alberta's rights as a province. Natural resources fall under provincial jurisdiction in Canada, not federal control. By imposing these restrictions, Ottawa is bypassing Alberta's authority and dictating terms that harm the province's economy. Smith has called this move unconstitutional, a violation of the division of powers laid out in Canada's Constitution. For many Albertans, Trudeau's actions have created a sense of alienation, as if their concerns and needs are being disregarded by a government that seems more interested in political theater than in governing for the good of all Canadians. Trudeau's repeated failures have created a growing divide between the federal government and provincial governments, particularly in Alberta. His refusal to listen to reason, combined with his tendency to impose one-size-fits-all solutions, has strained relationships with key provinces that feel sidelined in the decision-making process. Danielle Smith's opposition to the emissions cap is more than just about protecting Alberta's interests, it's about standing up for a fair and reasonable approach to governance. Smith has repeatedly argued that provinces, not the federal government, are best suited to understand their unique economic needs and challenges. This decentralized approach, she believes, would foster greater cooperation between the provinces and Ottawa and allow for policies that better reflect the diverse realities of the country. For many, the question isn't whether Alberta's concerns are valid, it's how much longer Canada can afford Trudeau's failed leadership. With every passing day, the case for change grows stronger. Trudeau's policies seem increasingly out of touch with the needs of everyday Canadians, and his failure to address the issues that matter most, like rising energy costs, inflation, and job security, has left many wondering if Canada's best days are behind it. The discontent with Trudeau's leadership is palpable, and leaders like Danielle Smith, who offer practical, solutions-oriented policies, are gaining more and more traction. Smith's fight against Trudeau's emissions cap is not just Alberta's fight, it is a fight for common sense, fairness, and a future where Canada can thrive. Trudeau's refusal to engage with provincial governments and listen to their concerns is jeopardizing the nation's economic stability and international standing. His obsession with virtue signaling has left him disconnected from the real issues facing Canadians today. As the country faces mounting economic challenges and political division, the question for Canadians is clear: how much longer will they tolerate Trudeau's failed leadership? Danielle Smith's vision for Alberta and Canada as a whole represents a practical and reasonable alternative to the chaos and mismanagement coming from Ottawa. With every failed policy, every scandal, and every misguided move, the case for change becomes stronger. Canadians deserve leaders who prioritize their well-being over political optics, and Smith's vision offers a path forward that takes both economic reality and environmental responsibility into account. The stakes couldn't be higher. Canada's energy security, economic future, and global standing are on the line as federal-provincial tensions reach a boiling point. Trudeau's refusal to listen to reason and his stubborn insistence on policies that undermine provincial authority are pushing Canada to the brink. It's time for a change in leadership, one that puts the country's interests first and looks for practical solutions instead of empty promises and political grandstanding. Smith's fight is a fight for the future of Canada, a future where the country's economy remains strong, its provinces retain their autonomy, and its people are no longer treated as afterthoughts in a political game. The question is, how much more of Trudeau's failures can Canadians afford?